For most of human history, an hour in June was longer than an hour in December. Not felt longer, was longer. In midsummer, an hour ran to about 80 minutes. In midwinter, about 40. Nothing about it was renamed. It sat in exactly the same place on the dial, and it was simply a different size. And nobody found that strange because an hour was never meant to be a length. It was a fraction. Here's how it worked. You take the daylight, sunrise to sunset, and you cut it into 12. Always 12. Then you take the night, and you do the same. That's your day, which raises the question nobody ever asks. Why 12? The best guess is your own hand, not your fingers, the joints in your fingers, 3 to a finger, 4 fingers, 12 on one hand, and you can count them off with your thumb while you're carrying something in the other. Egyptian sundials from around 1500 years before Christ are already cutting the daylight into 12. The night was the harder half, because a shadow needs a sun. So they used stars instead. 36 of them spread around the sky so that they came up in a known order through the year, and on any given night, roughly 12 of them rose while it was fully dark. 12 stars, 12 hours. Put the two halves together and you have a day with 24 parts in it, 3,500 years ago. For reasons that are half anatomy and half astronomy. The 60 is somebody else's doing. That comes out of Mesopotamia from a counting system built on 60 instead of 10, and it survived for a purely practical reason. 60 divides cleanly by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. In a world with no decimals, if you have to cut an hour into pieces, 60 is the most forgiving number there is. So before anybody had a machine, the shape was already set. 12, 12, and 60. And every single one of those numbers is a decision, which means that as the year turns and the daylight stretches, your hours stretch with it. In the summer, the days grow, so the hours grow. In the winter, they shrink, and so do the hours. At the latitude of southern Germany, the daylight swings from about 16 hours to about 8 over the course of a year. So a summer hour was quite literally twice the length of a winter hour. You have never once lived through an hour like that. But for thousands of years, that was simply what an hour was. Egypt had it. Rome had it. Medieval Europe had it. It's on the sundials, it's in the prayer books. It's the reason the working day and the church day both begin at first light and not at a number. And it worked because it was tied to the only clock anybody had. Think about what you actually needed to know before there were machines. Not what time it is, what's left, how much light is there before I have to stop working, when do I need to leave to get home? An hour that grows in summer and shrinks in winter answers that question perfectly, because it's the question the sun is already answering. A sundial does this without being asked. The shadow moves, the light runs out, the day closes itself. Water clocks were harder. If you want a water clock to keep temporal hours, you have to adjust it through the year. Change the vessel, change the flow, because the thing you're measuring keeps changing size underneath you. People did that for centuries. That was a job, and in the monasteries, it was somebody's whole life. Someone had to know when to ring the bell because the entire community moved on the bell. Not on a number, on a sound, made by a person who had worked out from the sky how far into the day everyone was. Then the machine arrives. Late 13th century in Europe, the first mechanical clocks. Weights, gears, an escapement that ticks. And here's the thing that changed everything. And it wasn't a decision anybody made. A mechanical clock cannot tick unevenly. Nobody chose that. That's what a machine is. It does the same thing at the same rate forever. It has no idea it's June. So monasteries that wanted to keep temporal hours had a problem. To do it properly with clockwork, you needed either 2 separate clocks or a mechanism you readjusted through the year, in steps as the daylight moved. Some tried. Almost nobody kept it up, because the alternative was so much easier. Leave the machine alone and let the hour be whatever the machine says it is. 24 of them, all identical, every day of the year, which means the clock did not measure the hour, it replaced it. And once it's in the tower, once the bell rings on the machine instead of on a person's judgment, something new exists in the world. A moment that everybody in the town shares that has nothing to do with where the sun is. And that is where this arrives. You didn't wake up at 7 o'clock this morning. You woke up when a number told you to. You set that number the night before, deliberately against the wishes of your own body. A body that had opinions about when it wanted to wake up. And lost. And that's the smallest one. Look at the rest of it. You eat at midday because it's midday, not because you're hungry. Most days you are not particularly hungry at 12, and you eat anyway, because the number came round. A meeting ends at 3 o'clock whether or not the thing it was about is finished. Everyone stands up. Nobody decided the conversation was over. The number decided. You know exactly what it feels like to be late. The small drop in the stomach, the walk that gets faster, and being late is a completely imaginary crime. There's nothing physically different about arriving at 9:15. It only means anything because a room full of people have all agreed to pretend that the same number means the same instant. You've had a night where you couldn't sleep and you did the arithmetic. If I fall asleep now, I get 5 hours, as if the number were the thing that rested you. And you sell it. Whatever you do for a living, some part of your life is priced by the hour, which means a unit invented so that monks could ring a bell at the right moment is now the thing you trade your days for. None of that is in the sun. All of it is in the machine. Now, the machine had one more thing to take, and this is where it gets strange again. For most of history, noon was a local fact. Noon is when the sun is highest where you are standing, which means the town 20 miles east of you has its noon a minute or so before you have yours. Every town kept its own time, and this was completely fine, because nothing moved faster than a horse and nobody ever noticed the difference. Then somebody built a railway, and a timetable is a promise made in advance, in a number, to people in a different town. It is the one thing that local noon absolutely cannot survive. If every station keeps its own time, the timetable is a work of fiction. So the railways did the only thing available. They picked one town's time and forced everybody else onto it. In Britain, that was Greenwich. Station clocks were fitted with an extra hand or a second dial, so you could see both local time and railway time. Because for a while, two different times were true in the same room. Local time lost, obviously, and then it kept losing. Standard Time across the United States in 1883, and the following year, an international conference sat down and drew the lines on a map. Time zones are not a discovery. They are a committee's decision about where one number should stop and the next one should start. Now look at the strangest unit of all, and notice on your way past that you have never once questioned it. A day is real. It's one rotation. You can feel it. A month is roughly real. It's roughly the moon. A year is real. It's one lap around the sun, and if you get it wrong, your crops fail, which is why every civilization eventually got it right. A week is nothing. There is no 7 of anything in the sky. Nothing orbits in 7. Nothing rotates in 7. 7 days is a number that some people started using and other people copied. And now most of the planet organizes its entire emotional life around which of the 7 it currently is. And the reason I can tell you that's not just a clever line is that somebody tried to get rid of it. In 1929, the Soviet Union abolished the week. The point was industrial. A factory that closes 1 day in 7 is a factory standing still 1 day in 7. So instead, everybody was sorted into 5 groups. They used colors: purple, blue, yellow, red, green, and each group got a different day off. 4/5 of the workforce was in the building at any moment. The machines never stopped. On paper, it's perfect. In practice, it fell apart, and not for the reason you'd expect. The machines did suffer because they were being run by whoever happened to be in that day and never stood still long enough to be repaired. But that's not what killed it. What killed it is that a married couple could end up in different colors. Your day off was Tuesday, and your wife's was Thursday, and your friends were scattered across the other 3, and so the day off stopped being a day off. It was just a day when you sat at home alone while everyone you cared about was at work. They tried a 6-day version instead, with fixed rest days for everyone. That lasted until June 1940, and then the 7-day week came back, and it has not been seriously challenged since. So the week didn't survive because it's true. It survived because it's the only way a large number of people can agree to stop at the same moment. It isn't a measurement, it's an appointment. There's one more thing in this, and it's the part I can't put down. The people who lived by temporal hours knew their hour was a convenience they couldn't not know. It stretched under their feet every summer and shrank again every winter. You cannot forget that something is man-made when it visibly changes shape twice a year. You have never seen an hour change length. Yours has been exactly the same size your entire life, delivered by a machine that has never once been wrong in front of you. So you have never had a single reason to suspect that it's a decision. They knew their door was painted on. You don't. time exists. Something is genuinely passing and you can feel it, and it does not care about any of this. What we made up is the number, and the number is the only part you obey. You will not miss an appointment because the sun moved. You'll miss it because you looked at a rectangle in your hand, saw 2 digits, and felt something. Every meeting you have ever kept was a promise to strangers you will never meet, that all of you would agree to pretend the same number meant the same moment. And you've kept that promise without being asked every day since you were about 6 years old. The one thing the clock cannot do is the only thing you ever actually wanted from it. It cannot tell you how long anything felt. An hour with someone you're about to lose and an hour in a waiting room are the same hour. The machine is very clear about that, and the machine is wrong. And it's been wrong the whole time, and we never rebuilt it because it turned out we didn't need it to be right. We only needed it to be the same for everybody. So, when was the last time an hour didn't feel like an hour? Don't tell me the answer is no. You already know which one it was. Most of you thought of it before I finished the question.